Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of the internet. It's Saturday, the 26th of February. There's sunshine out, and I'm not too well today. I had a really upset stomach yesterday evening, and intense tiredness and headachiness before that, and I really could just curl up in bed at the moment. But I thought, no, I'm going to do some art, you know. I've had to sort some things out for my accountant because I need to pay my tax very, very soon. She's just putting the final touches to it, so no doubt I'll have my bill to pay later on today, which is fine. It's what it is. It happens. And this is actually my second go at recording a video, because the first one, why do I do this to myself? Can somebody explain this? This is the design that I came up with, and I started adding colour, and I thought, by the end, some things I like about it. I like the metallic patterns. I used a brush and some gold paint to add those. I used watercolour inks, the Ecoline inks, to add a base coat of colour and then shadow with chalk pastels. But it's the colours, and I'm just not sure it works. But I'm going to use this to draw a card for you, with you. Two things I've got. I've got this card blank. It's ivory. I wish I could have found my craft coloured ones or white ones, but it's not. It's 5 3/4 inches square or 14.7 centimetres square. Cards for some reason are made in inches, not millimetres generally, or centimetres. So awkward size. But the bit on the top isn't. It's either 4 inches square or 20 centimetres. No, I lie, not 20, that would be huge. 10 centimetres square, which is great. So all I've done with this is I've drawn a pencil border in using a ruler. I've got a couple of different kinds of rulers like this. They've got a gridded scale on them, so it's easy to line up one of the lines against the edge and draw the pencil line. And basically, you'll get a roughly equidistant line all the way around. Yes, I know it's not Zentangle, but you know, I'm not a Zentangler as such. I like the patterns, I like the philosophy, the idea of keeping things simple and non-representational, but I tend to go off on my own. So I'm going to start somewhere close to the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly the middle. And I'm going to draw a not circular shape. Ooh, that one looks like a butter bean. And I'm going to pop a border around it. And on the other one, I did pop some shapes in the middle. I put more on the other one, but I'm making them bigger this time because I want to. Then the next one round, I kind of put these stems between. If I show you, I put these here, but I don't think I want to do those. I think I just want an uneven shape, and then perhaps another one around that, so we're getting a very stylized kind of flower. And then I'm going to pop in here some lines just to break this up, and I'm going to do this with the lines quite unevenly spaced and in groups as well, so we have groups of them to add some interest to that. And I'm going to do the same between this and the outside edge. The only thing I'm going to make sure I don't do is to have one line drawing from one to the next. So it looks, that helps to break this up and create a different kind of layer. Now I'm sure there's some kind of Zentangle pattern that is similar in nature to this, but I don't know definitely if there is or what it's called. So I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comments. Oh, it's just like such and such. Yeah, it could very well be like such and such, but I'm not an walking encyclopedia of Zentangle. And that's quite nice, but I do think I want to just finish it off with a border around it. This is something I do like to do. And I was so tempted to put a border around here, but I didn't. I'm going to let the lines here do the work of the border for me. And when I was drawing this, I was so tempted to use Diva Dance, but I didn't. So I'm going to work out towards the corners. I'm not going to add lots and lots of layers necessarily, but I do want to add some mucas here. And I'm going to start by drawing nice big and chunky mucas towards each corner. And can you see here, I've sort of kicked up from this line a bit. I've, instead of going straight, I've started and I've bent up, drawn the muka, and I've mirrored that bend there. And just to make sure that I'll do this in all of them. This isn't interesting because I've got a big area here, but I'm going to do the same and have this S shape stem, which is why I kicked it up. So big muka here, big muka. But lovely for being big. What this does is it just splits up the space to make a start with how we fill this area in. Now here I just spilled outside the pencil line. In fact, I did on this one as well. And that doesn't worry me at all because the line is just a guide. It's just to make sure that I leave enough space around the edge for a nice border. So there's that one. And then this one. I like to put these little teardrop shapes where these mucas sort of like curl under themselves, as it were, rather than just a little line. Just think it just gives that feeling that something is curled under there, isn't it? Very much so. There we are. So that's split this up nicely, and we've got a repetition of the pattern. They're not identical, but it repeats around, which gives that feeling of, I don't know, rotation even. So I'm now going to do the next lot, and I think I'm going to draw my mucas coming off here somewhere. So I'm going to go back round in the other direction. Oh no, I must probably still work clockwise. But I've got these mirroring. I had a bit of an odd shaped line here, but I can adjust that by using my pen and thickening that line as if it's part of this area there, as if there's a gap between them. So it's a case of doing this now with each of them. So I'm working to the right of each of these to start to fill this space in. So there's that one. You can make them as big and as little as you like. They don't have to be equally sized or anything. They just, as far as I'm concerned, they just need to be pointing in the same kind of direction, which is to the right. We're growing them to the right. Like this. I'll just turn it that way to draw the stems in. I do like to, I don't know, I vary what direction I use my pen. I often say, oh, I do like to use my pen going away from me. Sometimes I do if I particularly want to see what's going on. Now that does look a little bit out of place, that thicker area there, so we can mimic it on all of them as if it's a deliberate thing rather than me trying to cover up a bit of a awkward line. So now that looks a bit more coherent, so just work with it. Just do the same. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a muka that comes round behind the one we've just drawn. So I'm going to pretend I'm drawing around there, and then I'm going to carry my circle on from underneath. So it will just nestle behind. I quite like that. Nestled mukas. I'm going to do the same with this one. There'll be a bigger overlap here because of this is so much bigger, but that's fine. We're going to get a repeated pattern, but it's not going to be a very symmetrical kind of repeated pattern, which is fine by me. And again here, let's have one. This one can go right the way out to the edge, up. Like that. So that's quite nice. I'm just filling in this space under here with some thicker line, sort of like a curved line, and then colour in behind it black, just to give a nice finished feel here. And black does give some kind of structure to everything here. I think so. Helps to bring, to bring the structure out, or, you know, to add interest and that weight that's sometimes needed. So there we are. So I've gone round all of those. So I want to start on the other side. So here I am twisting my paper around madly. I'm going to have some tea. I haven't eaten yet today, so my second mug of tea. It's going to be easier for me to draw in this way if I've got this at the top rather than at the bottom. It doesn't make much difference, but I'm just going to do it. No, I'm going to do it here. So I want to have this one perhaps coming around and joining. Create that. Create the stem. Now this is quite a small space here, so I'm going to fill this space in black. That will need a bit there as well, and that will there. So I'm going to look at how I can join this on to these. Let's have a look. So that's a nice shape there. Again, this is quite small, so I'm just going to fill it in with black ink. This paper is the Clairefontaine mixed media paper, paint on, and it's quite rough in surface, so I think this is going to be the death for my pens today, but that's fine. So we've got that there, and here I'm going to pop one in like this, but it's going to go right behind that stem. It won't be seen round the other side, but it's just there. And then this gap here again, this one's quite small, so is this one, so I'm just going to fill it in black. It saves me trying to wrangle something like perk into it, which is what I did in the original one. And then I've got one last one, I think this one, isn't it? Yep, you can count, there's 4 there, so I need a 4th one here. So again, I'm going to go up, round, down, that shape there, and then I can just complete this one. That one's big enough, I think, for me to leave as it is, but this one is going to get itself coloured in. Okay, let me just check I've got all of these little bits done where I round those corners there. So that's beginning to look very muka, beginning to look a lot like mukamas. And I'm going to carry on adding mucas until I fill this space. So I'm going to do them on the right hand side. This one is going to be small, so I'm going to just fill that in like that. So I'm alternating the sides I do them on, because it will create an interesting kind of overlapping nature. It doesn't matter if you want to carry on just growing from one side to another. It's just my choice to do it this way. So there's that one. Okay, so I did that one. That needs a bit there. That's okay. And then this one is going to be interesting, because I think I'll have it coming down behind here and round like so, which is fine, it works. Just make that perhaps a little bit thicker there. And that is then all of them done, I think. Positive that's everything done. You can see where my lines aren't exactly wonderful. And then I'm going to work from the other side of this gap. So the last mucra I added here is here, so I'm going to go to this side, simply because it's that variation in direction they're growing from. And I just think it will create some nice overlapping spaces. So again, it's from this side. So I think this one I'm going to grow it around this way, because that creates a much more natural feeling stem here. It didn't feel comfortable to draw it this way round. It would have worked, but this is quite a sharp curve. So I decided that that would be better. I think this one as well might fit in better if we go this way round. We're going to get a very there we go. Got the stem in, so that fits quite nicely there. And let's just make sure I round everything. Otherwise going back and trying to find them afterwards is a bit of a pain. And this one too could do with a mucra that will go like this, because it just fits in that space a bit better. How do you know to do this? I think you just have to trust your feelings, your gut, and think, which would be the best way for me to draw this in. There's a lot of mucra going on there, fair play. I have to say that, there's a lot of mucra here. Right, before I do anything, do I want to? No, I think I'm going to leave it as it is for now. I now have to decide what I'm going to do with these gaps along the edge, because I would like to have a fairly straight border there. It looks quite nice as it is. And to fill in some of these other gaps, because if we fill these gaps in with pattern, it will make a bit more sense of the mucras. Now, I could use black to do this, and I do like using black. In this version, I've used perks, and I quite like that. But to make them a bit different, I used a 03 pen. So say goodbye to the Pigma Micron 03, because this will ruin it. And there's no rhyme or reason where I start the perks, but they need to be squashed in and made to look like little balls all squashed in behind each other, like that. And it sort of fills this space really nicely with pattern and texture. Here I can actually get some really big ones in this gap. Well, I got the finer pen out if I've made a bit of a mucky mess. Some of the sections here. That's a bit too small for a mucra, so I'll just fill it in with black. And this blackness, this darkness around the edge, really does help to define the mucus as well. Even though we're filling the spaces in between, filling them somehow seems to bring the mucus out, helps to make sense of the pattern. This one here, I got the feeling this feels to swoop this way more than any other way, so I'm going to start with perks here. Really, you could pop them anywhere. So I'm just going to fill, again, this one feels like we'd fill them from the bottom up here perhaps. There's there. This one's an interesting shape. I think I'm going to pop one in the middle there and really seriously squish some perks in the bottom. Fill those little corner gaps in, and then I can add some smaller perks to fill that space up, which gives an interesting pattern there. This one I think I'm going to put quite a narrow, short and wide or tall and thin perk in there, and its neighbour like that, and repeat this kind of shape as I move up here. If I had to put a perfectly circular one in there, I'd only get a couple of perks in like this. And sometimes I think it's nice to have this variation in size and shape. Okay, this needs a bit of rounding going on here. So while I'm at it, I'll use that as the basis of my next pile of perks. What do you call a collection of perks? A squishable? A squished? A squish of perks. I quite like that. A squish of perks. I think I really started to enjoy perk with the Fragments of Your Imagination challenge back in January. So that was one of the fragments was perk. Or a fragment with some perks in. And to put it in unusual shapes and to use it as a repeated pattern. I don't know, I just sort of like fell in love with it. Simple but really effective. It's all these lovely shapes you get with it as well. Very versatile. It's a very tiny space, but I think I might get a couple in there. If not, actually, it looks a bit raggedy, so we'll just colour it all in black. So how are you all doing? Hope you're all well. I hope you're all finding time to be creative, having a go at drawing some things. The lovely thing about this kind of art is that because it's not meant to look like anything, you know, in terms of, observations. So we're not drawing real plants or people or animals or places or anything. We're drawing things that are meant to be non-representational, although sometimes a bit of representation, will creep in. But it takes away that fear, I think, of people putting pen to paper and drawing for the sheer pleasure of drawing. And there is an artistic skill. I think I went off the page there. I'm sorry. I tend to gravitate more and more towards me, closer and closer. These bits around the edges, I am going to fill with squished perks and then just finish the edge off with some black to create a little, for it to become part of the border, the edge rather. So yeah, I think by taking away that belief that to draw well or to create beautiful art, you have to be able to draw things that look like what you're looking at. And that's not the case. I think this is where Zentangle has done the power of good to people. It's giving you the tools to allow you to create, to draw, to create beautiful things without that pressure of having to draw like a photograph. And I don't know where that idea comes from. I taught art in school when I was a teacher, science teacher, but I was doing my A-level art at the time. A-levels are exams, courses, you know, qualifications that you get when you're usually about 18 in secondary school, high school. And they are qualifications that are then used for people to apply to universities to start their degrees, their bachelor's degrees or similar. So, you know, I don't know if there is an equivalence in America for this, because when you go to college or university, it's not quite the same as going to college or university here in the UK. The qualifications don't necessarily tie in well together, as it were. But anyway, so you know, the classes I taught, the very first lessons I had with the new students, as in students that are new to the school, starting high school, 11 years of age, will be, how many of you think you're good at art? You know? How many of you think that you're really good at it? And you'd be lucky if you got a hand up. So the next question would be, how many of you think you have to draw, you know, create a drawing that is like a photograph to think you're good at art? Every hand went up. So I said, well, let's have a look at that. Let me show you some pictures by very famous, very well thought of artists. And you tell me if they look like pictures or like photographs. So we had all kinds of things, you know, some of the cubists like Picasso, Van Gogh, and so on. The abstract artists, whose names escape me because I'm focusing on art, and some portraits which were very strange in their way. So I can't remember the name of the artist, but people with green skin and things like that, which isn't quite the case. The Fauves, who tried to represent a feeling of a place in the use of colours, if I remember rightly, how they added colour to a drawing. And then, of course, people like, well, Kandinsky, because Kandinsky's one of my favourites. In fact, it's quite true. There's one of my Kandinsky-inspired artworks I often see on the internet, and people think it's by Kandinsky, and I have to explain to them, no, it's not a Kandinsky. I actually drew that. It's inspired by Kandinsky's work. I used his ideas to explore this when I was an A-level student, but it is not a Kandinsky. In fact, there's 2 or 3 of mine. And you're just there going, for goodness sakes, get a grip. It says Kandinsky inspired. Not by Kandinsky, but inspired by Kandinsky's work. Yeah, I know. So, this is the basic structure of this, but there are some things that I think I want to do. Now, I much prefer working just in black, but I'm so tempted to add some colour in. I don't want to, because I know I will mess it up. I know I will. I absolutely know I will. So I'm going to add some pattern to some of these sections here. I'm not sure what I can do about the mucas. We'll have a look at those in a moment. But I think these broad areas of white could do with something that breaks them up a little bit. So here I'm going to fill this up with little circles. So I think it's a variation of a tangle pattern called the tipple. But I'm not trying to make the circles all the same size. If anything, I'm deliberately trying to vary them. But if I want a darker area, so for example around the edges, I'm going to draw lots of small circles close together, so we're going to get a density of line. and an interest. But it's not going to be, you know, sort of like rigid. They all have to be this size. I just want to see if I can get smaller patterns there. And then expand the size towards the centre as if I've got a highlight there. It's bigger bubbles in the middle. So it lightens the density. So I'm using the density of ink with a pattern, a simple pattern, to vary where it's shadow. And it does look quite shadowy along the edges. I am surprised. I always surprise myself with things like this. So I'm going to do that in a couple more sections along here. Not necessarily the biggest sections either. But I'm going to draw some smaller circles in around the edge first. I am going to vary their size. Let's keep them tiny. And this is the reason why I've used a smaller size pen here, because it's easier to get those tiny circles in. An 05 would be a bit on the clumsy side for this. But that already is adding, yeah, I like that. Why do I need to use colour when I can use black and pattern? Traditional colour. You know I love my digital media. My way, I love to add colour digitally. But when it comes to traditional media, oh, I have a nightmare of a time. Lesson to be learned. The next time I do a drawing in black and white, before I start to think of adding colour traditionally, is scan it in. Because it's easy to print these out if I wanted to these days. So I've got 3 there, but I do feel I perhaps need a couple more. So to go back to whether you think you're good at art or not, it comes with those preconceptions we have from childhood, where people tell us what is good art and what isn't, and what it takes to be a good artist. You know, I certainly remember my art lessons in school. Well, from the first 2 years of high school. Oop, my phone, excuse me a moment. Oh well, there we are, one of those random calls. So, does anybody else get these where people phone up with some kind of market, they claim to be market research, but really they're trying to get to send you things from companies and companies to get your information and so on. So not very happy, but there we are. When I spoke to actually got quite stroppy and I said, no, I'm not interested, but it's free, but I'm not interested. Honestly. But there we are. So I think I was talking about art and you know, sort of that you don't have to draw as if something's a photograph to be good at art and creativity. And it amazes me that people still get hung up on this. You know, I can't draw a straight line. Well, I rarely draw straight lines. I prefer wobbly ones. I've got some biggish sections here, so I am going to alter this just a tad, just to have a nicer feeling here, and to separate, just split up some of these spaces, so that feels a bit better. And I do think this area here I could fill in the same. These tiny little bubbles around the edge, and slowly getting bigger towards the centre, so that feeling of a nice highlight going on. And of course, if we put the biggest ones in the middle, then around the edges we're going to get the smallest circles as well. So there's a feeling with that one of it actually curving just from this without anything else being done. So I quite like that. I really do like that. Now I've got to decide what I do in these outside ones. Now, part of me is desperate to put sort of like a border in the ones I'm going to fill in. And I'm sort of tempted to do that, but I also think perhaps with this one, I'll leave the bigger ones blank and I'll do something with the smaller ones. And here I'm going to do the Zentangle pattern that's called, what's it called? It'll come to me. Maybe. It's not. But it's this one where it's a kind of V-shaped weaving. So it's a different kind of thing to this one here. And I am going, so it won't get lost. What's it called? Betweed. That's what it is, betweed. So I'm going to put some like border edges in around these, just to help separate them as well from the other space, because it's quite a dense pattern, betweed. So I do want to just, yeah, perhaps not. So you start with an arcing line going upwards, and you just alternate the sides, trying to keep the gaps here about the same. And I will just round the corners there a little bit, perhaps here. See, I'm tempted to put them close together as well. We'll see. But I think it's useful to use a different pattern here to add interest to this particular ring. Right. So yeah, so to go back to my story, my lovely pupils who didn't think they could do art, by the end of this time, looking at all this wonderful art that's, you know, Van Gogh as well was in there, you know, some of the Impressionists and so on. And once they saw the art that they really liked, that was really popular, that other people liked, and also that was very expensive and collectible, they liked that idea as well, then they realised that they too could probably do art. And at the end of the lesson, I had pupils say, you know, convinced, they said, I think I can do art now. And there was one little boy who I'd been told, oh, watch out for him, he's trouble. And I never like to prejudge a person. Other people do, you know, because we get information from their primary schools, there's, you know, the schools they go to before they came to secondary school to high school. And we get information from there about their behaviour and their abilities and so on. And I think it's an opportunity for children, for young people, to be able to wipe the slate clean and start again, start afresh. So I never listened. I always would take people on face value. And this one boy I'd been warned against came up to me at the end of the lesson and he said, Miss, that's the best lesson I've ever had. And he said, do you know what? I think I might be able to be good at art. And I said, well, I'm sure you will be with that attitude. And I also took them for science, and he was an absolute treasure in science as well. And I don't think I ever had to have words with him about behaviour or attitude in the 5 years that I taught him. Very contrary to what I was told to expect from this child. And so it just goes to show you, just don't prejudge people. Everybody has the right to have a fresh start, I think. Wary, yes. But, you know, I wasn't prepared to set up circumstances where this child felt they were being judged based on their past, as it were. And he did really well, actually, in school. Because I taught classes for children with special needs. I think he remained in special needs education right up to the end of his secondary schooling. But he did really, really well. And it was, you know, that's all I ever wanted to see from pupils, is that they did the best they could and achieved, you know, their potential, and they felt good about what they were doing. So there's my central motif, which has got a lot more interest in it. Now my problem is now that it's a bit lost because everything else is a bit busy, but I'm going to have a think. I think I know what I want to do with these mucas, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an imaginary centre, and I'm just going to pop some shapes like this into the lowest part of each muca. As if there's a circle here and they're growing at the edge of that circle. This one's a bit more challenging text behind, but it's the same kind of thing. We'll only see part of them. The same with this one here. And here. That's got an unusual collection of them, but I'm fine with that being the case, because that variation is interesting. Let's have a go with those. This one too, this one. I've got these much further up than I have with the others with that one, but that's fine. Yeah, this poor pen is going to definitely be consigned to the bin as I finished. It's struggling. Might be all right on a different kind of paper, having said that. I'd love to have used my fountain pens, but I know it takes forever for the ink to dry on this paper, and the chances of me smudging are high even with a pen like this, but fountain pen makes it even more likely that I'm going to have a disaster of smudge. Smudge disaster. There we are, so that adds some interest to those. And the perks, I'm going to leave the perks exactly as they are, because I am going to go hunting I want to hunt down that'll do, what do you call it? One of those things that you can shade with. I've got a graphite pencil here. Part of me would love to use a alcohol marker on this, but I know from past experience that the alcohol markers just bleed into this paper and really do get into quite a mess if we're not careful. So I'm going to pop some shadow in these central bits here. Hopefully this will be small enough to be able to do this nicely. Just to pop some shadow there, and I think I'm going to put some graphite right around the edge of this and give it. The way to think of this is to imagine yourself looking down on this, and everything that will be a bit further away from your view is going to be in shadow. So as I want this to feel that it's doming upwards, it's around the outside of this shape that I want the shadow. If I wanted to feel that it was sinking down, I'd make it dark in the middle. So it's thinking about things like this. Now with this, I'm going to put shadow all the way around this edge here. And I'm going to use this just to gently smooth this out so we've got a nice smooth shadow around this, like so. And I'm going to put shadow underneath this layer here. I'm not going to put any at the edge of this one. I want it to feel as if it's sinking down and this is catching all the light along the edge. We could add a subtle shadow along the edge, but I really want to get quite a dark shadow underneath here. Well, this is a 2B matte graphite pencil, and these are the Faber-Castell ones, but I've seen that lots of companies are now doing them, because you get something new on the market and everybody wants to do it. So, and a matte graphite pencil is sort of like something that artists dreamed of having for years, I think, because of its shiny nature, graphite. Charcoal gives a very matte finish, but charcoal is incredibly smudgeable and very messy. It's not my favourite. It squeaks as well when you use charcoal sticks. Squeaky on the paper. Don't like squeaky food. Things that squeak on my teeth. So mushrooms I love, but not raw mushrooms because they squeak. So that's just me. So we've got that going on. Okay, I'm going to leave this ring here. As white as I can. But what I'm going to do as well with these is I'm going to pop some shadow, perhaps around the outside edge of these segments. Actually thinking about it, I should have perhaps popped it on the inside edge. But we'll see what happens. Just to give some dimension here. I'll leave these lines in the centre as they are. I'm not going to do anything with them. And I think just being able to move this perhaps into the edge of these will give that feeling of perhaps some shadowing on the edges there. So that looks, it's beginning to come to life a bit, isn't it? Okay, the betweeds, I am going to put shadow down the edge of each of these because that's where I want some shadow. An alternative to using graphite pencil for this is to use chalk pastels, but they're incredibly messy. I've got one of my silicone mattes that I've been working on as a background, the plain colours. Oh, it's so mucky after using chalk pastels on that failure. I really do need to start keeping a notebook of what not to do, or big sticky notes where I can see it. Angela, don't even think about doing this again. So that adds a bit more dimension there, which is lovely. Okay, I am going to add a shadow around the inside of this as well. Yeah, because I want that outer ring to feel like it's sticking up. Sometimes by doing that, you give that feeling of that ring has dimension itself, even though I may not. It's too small really for me to put any shadow in it. But I can pop some shadow right at the bottom of this. Nice thing about these matte pencils, graphite pencils, is they do tend to be a bit blacker than the traditional graphite, which is very grey and always looks a bit mucky to me. Now then, with this, I do have, right, where have I put it? There we have. I've got a bit grey right around the middle of this, so I'm taking a kneadable eraser and I'm just going to go in the centre of this outer ring, just to tidy up the highlights a little bit. Try to keep the highlight then the same in the middle. I might do the same here, just around the edge, just to lighten that up a bit. Again, not strictly Zentangle, but it's Tangle. So this one here, I definitely want shadow around underneath this inner ring, because I want that to lift above all the mucus and everything else. So let's do that very quickly. The nice thing is, because the graphite pencil will smudge out like chalk pastels will, it's just a bit cleaner. You don't get so grubby when you're using it. And today I'm not in the mood for being grubby. Trying my best to stay awake, knowing that if I sleep too much in the day, I won't sleep overnight and it has a knock-on effect on me tomorrow. Let's see. There, perhaps could do with a bit of smudging. Don't want to smudge it out too far, but we still want that kind of, you know, softened edge to graphite, so it feels there's a shadow being cast far and wide, or wider than just the narrow space here. So we instantly get that floating above. I'm looking at the computer screen so I can check, yep, that illusion works. Okay, now this is where it will take a lot more time for me to add shadow and highlight, but with these perks I'm going to put shadow around the edges and at the bottom, I suppose. I really do want these to almost disappear backwards, so that means making them quite dark in some ways, but trying to leave that highlight as well, because we still want them to catch some light. So I'm leaving a highlight somewhere in the middle if I can. Bear in mind, I can always use an eraser to go back and remove some of this graphite if I've made it too dark. So already they're beginning to move backwards, and it helps with their shape, you know, it helps to make them feel more rounded. These little perks, the perky perks. Squish of perks. That's amused me today. So, to go back to the question of drawing and art, don't ever be afraid to be creative. If somebody doesn't think you're any good with it, remember they may be judging you from the fact they believe that you're only good at art if you can draw like a camera takes a photograph. And that is not the case. I can't remember what the quote is that I like, or who gave the quote I like, but I did it a little while back. Oh, it's Ruskin's one, is all art is but dirtying the paper delicately. And I quite like that one, because that's the whole idea, you know, well, for me it is, vaguely delicately and hopefully in a pretty way, because, you know, it's my way of bringing a bit of beauty into the world. It's a bit of self-expression, because every time I draw, you get a view of what my mind likes, what kinds of shapes and forms and patterns that my mind really does like. And my emotions can come out in choicer colours. Better if I do things monochrome, it has to be said. But that can speak of you. But that's quite a nice quote. But others, you know, that's the whole thing for me, is that it's about self-expression. And who's to tell you your self-expression is wrong, or that you're not good enough? Good enough to whose standards? I think that I draw every day, even now, even as I'm feeling a bit still and not with it, and, you know, I've got some things on my mind. But who's to say that my art is anything other than me expressing myself and enjoying it? And that's how I think people should approach it. And it's like with music. I've got quite wide tastes in music. There's some I really don't like, but my tastes are quite wide. And although I have some things that I really love, if I like it, I like it, and that's my whole thing. You know, too many people get, I don't know. I was going to say, it seems that a lot of people get stuck in the I only like this kind of music. And I think it's a shame because you miss out on so much in some ways, but it's each to their own. And you know, some people won't understand why I don't like a particular kind of music, no doubt, as well. Okay, these mucas need some shading, so I'm going to shade the heck out of the bottom of them, you know, where these little bits are. And you know what, I'm going to shade over these little bits because I've got a sneaky feeling there may be some gold going in here. So let's do this fast and dirty. And see where that takes me. So, oh, there we are. All shadow. Well, all with graphite, so all it needs now is that bit of shadow going on. Spreading it out so we get that. Try and get these looking nice and, what's my word? Plumptious. But again, it's not so much getting realistic shadows, it's giving that suggestion that there's some form to these. And rather than working with the idea of a light source being somewhere, because that's quite hard with these kinds of drawings, because there's no real one right way to view them. They can be viewed from lots of different directions, and they should look nice from different directions. When I do my kind of entangled art, the kinds of drawings I'm known for, the Doodle World ones or ones with characters in, well, there often is a right way up. But it's nice to think that you could actually put it on the side and you're living in a realm of different gravity where gravity rules in a different way. Well, who knows? But the last thing I want to do is just add some shadows to the stems to add some interest there, because they are a bit white and sticky out and noticeable. So let's have a look and see if we can get some shadows going. So I'm trying to pop the shadow just to one side of the stem where possible. It's not always possible because sometimes they're too narrow to do this too. But try and take them up towards that black spot as much as possible. This one will need that kind of attention, as will that one and this one and that one. This one and that one. I also, as I've said before, I'm also aware that no matter what, I can always do something if I overly shadow or obscure something I don't want obscured with shadow. I'm quite happy for all of these here really to be quite shadowed, because I do want to push them towards the background so that that central motif sticks above them. So this is how you do it, in a very clumsy Angela kind of way. I'm quite clumsy at things like this, but we get there in the end. So I think I was saying about art, you know, if you enjoy it, like this is going to end up as a greetings card. I don't know who I'm going to send it to, but I'll find somebody who I can send it to, no doubt. And it's an expression of something that is just me. It's not pretending to be any grand, you know, expression of, you know, artistry that people talk very, you know, pompously and in depth about, and that most people go, what? You know, It's something that's, I feel, is meant to be pretty, is meant to look nice, and is meant to be enjoyed. You know, it's that simple as far as I'm concerned. And I think I also like to think that we've all got something that we can bring to art, to the world, in one way or another. So if you're looking to become a world famous artist with gallery exhibitions and, you know, your name in bright lights in, you know, papers and so on, that's one thing. But that tends to be art that isn't for everybody, or, you know, not everybody can appreciate it, I suppose. But it is your personal taste. I'm not big necessarily on art that has a lot of social commentary or things that make you feel uncomfortable, because I think the world and life makes us feel uncomfortable enough if you're aware of what's going on. But I know there's a purpose for it, and there's a need for that sort of thing. But I like to think I like art that will make me feel, you know, make me smile, will give me something lovely to look at in the day, and to feel really good about such things. So what I'm doing now, my last little touches here, is I'm going to pop some bits of gold here and there as highlights, almost as ways of catching the light in these sections, perhaps even in the most shadowy bits. Should be a glint of gold in the darkness. There we are. It's very metaphoric, talking about things that don't have social commentary. But I just think that it's a place for all kinds of art, and I don't think art should be looked down upon because it's not highfalutin or, you know, cerebral in some way. I think there's a need for art to be accessible for people to enjoy it, to be able to afford to own it. You know, whether it's as a print or on a t-shirt or a sticker. You know, it's nice for people to have things that they like. It says something about them. And I think, you know, this does say something about me. It's that attention to detail that I like. It's my observation. I said about observational drawing, but my observational drawing is okay. And I use that observational drawing to help me develop the stylized forms of things in many ways. I'm able to look at things and pick out the simple shapes. I've always done that. You know, as a scientist, I had to draw things. I draw my observations and describe my observations. And this is going to take me a bit of attention because I've picked up a thicker brush than I wanted to. I wanted the finer one that I was using a bit earlier on. This will work if I can. Just want to fill some gold in between these lines that I've drawn if I can. I'm going to have to go and get that finer brush because this is just a bit too thick. So just pop that down. There it is, right on the edge. I couldn't see it. So I picked it up. As soon as I picked it up, I could see it. That's better. This is a 0 brush. The one I was using was, I think, a 2. But different brushes, different companies, you know, their sizes can vary. I like this one because it is quite short, the bristles, the hair. They're not real bristles. I only use synthetic brushes. I think I have a sable brush in my collection, which was bought a long time ago by accident. And it reminds me that I'm to always check before I buy something. I know people say natural hair is better. Oh, I don't necessarily think that's the case because I like animals a lot. To be honest with you, I find these brushes a lot, they seem to work well for me when I do use them. These are ProArt. They're the ProArt series 107 spotters. They've got relatively short fibres, hair with them, which means that they're a lot easier to control, and they also have a lot of spring, a lot of bounce to them, which means it's a lot harder to vary the thickness of in some ways, or it's a lot easier to be consistent with the thickness of line that you want to draw. So I know I could use a dip pen with some gold ink, or I could use a jelly roll pen for this, but the problem is the jelly rolls are so thick that it's really not easy to fill a gap like these, which are very small, with gold. So I don't know if you can see, it's just that hint of gold there now. And it just lifts it, just gives it something. As I nearly put my brush in my teacup, which would not be a very good idea. Wouldn't harm me, actually. So I'm just going to add gold here to these little teardrop shapes on the muka. I'm trying to stay within the lines because this gold paints, this gold, it is a paint now. It's actually it's an iridescent mica powder, iridescent powder. But when you add water to it, you can turn it into like a watercolour paint, and it sticks. It's got something in it, some resin or some binder of some kind that allows it to stick. The nice thing is you can add as little or as much of this powder to either water or to other paints. If you add it to other paints, you get an iridescent paint. You get these little flecks of gold in it. So you can add colour and sparkle at the same time. You can also add a little bit of it to water in a mister bottle and use it to spray a fine mist of iridescent particles over work. I've done that in the past with mixed media work, and it's lovely. But you want to do it, you don't want to draw on top of it because the mica bits will pick up with pens and will clog them up and wreck them. You don't need to ask how I know that. Experience. I'm actually really quite glad I chose to add some gold to these areas, because there's some shadow underneath which will actually show through the iridescence in a way, because I'm using quite a light layer of this. Well, in most cases, not in every, but that variation of the amount of gold is also something that will be of interest to this. And if it's on top of the black line, I'm going to leave it as it is, because I don't want to go over all of these lines and properly wreck a pen, instead of having a pen that may be okay on a different kind of paper for a while. I really need to sort out my relationship with fountain pens, I think. To do something like this, I do need to use waterproof ink in them. And the waterproof ink does take a little while, well, all fountain pen ink takes a little while to dry. And the usual kind of ink, the ink that will dry a little bit faster, perhaps, isn't always isn't waterproof. And so doing this, the colour of the ink would run, which can give a very interesting effect, actually. Black inks have got so many different colours in them, different dyes. They actually are very beautiful when you add water to them, because the colours will spread out different distances. And I used to do that in science and look at it. It's called chromatography, where you split the colours deliberately to see what dyes are in the ink. And interestingly, it's used in forensic science to detect forgery and so on. Amongst other things, it's much more, chromatography is much more than detecting forgeries or dyes in inks and things. It literally means coloured writing, chromatography, coloured graphs. So there we are. There it is, done. Just waiting for it to dry. But there's plenty of subtle gold on there. I do need to put my my little signature or my initials on here somewhere. I'm trying to work out if there's a right way or a wrong way, and there isn't really. So what I'm tempted to do is to find somewhere. I found the perfect place, I think. Being careful not to touch any wet gold. It does dry pretty quickly because it's just a little bit of water. But I think I'm going to put my initials inside a perk. So that's perking marvellous. There we go. So I've popped that in there. So it becomes part of the pattern, but you can turn this around any way you like. So the very last thing that I need to do, or one of the very last things, is I've got the card here. So it opens. I'm going to check that all of this is now nice and dry. It should be, because I said it doesn't take long to dry. Just in case, I'll bring my piece of tissue over. I've got some glue here. It's just, I got the Tombow Mono glue, which I quite like. It's got a fine nozzle, it's got a broader end, but it doesn't dry too quickly, so you've got a wiggling time. When it dries, it's really, really strong bond with paper anyway. So let's have a look. So I've got this the right way. Now this is the way that I always end up making a right pig's ear of it, because I don't get it particularly level with the sides and things, which is why I appreciate the little bit of wiggle time. I think that's more or less central. Oh, perhaps that side needs to go a little bit that way. I think that's okay, and so it's going to stay because I'm now going to push it down, give it a good smooth with that, and there we go. Now the last thing I think I want to do, and hopefully I can find this. Oh, bang crash, I do apologise. I've got my set of metallic pens here, my Sakura ones. So this is a different colour of gold, but I think it will work nicely. So I've got some scrap paper here. Well, it's scrap now if it wasn't before. I'm just going to check that runs and clean the ball off. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the pen roughly directly vertical, and I'm going to gently and slowly move it down along the edge of this paper, because hopefully then it will be an equidistant and I'll get an even bead of the ink along. That's my hope anyway. And up it goes and along, like so. So there's that outer edge of gold, and I am tempted to do one inside. I will draw this with my hand. Well, yeah, but by eye, you know, by sight, and just pop this here. And what I'd love to do, but I think I've overstayed my time really with the video, because this is 41 minutes. I don't know how long the one was before the phone went. So the problem with gel pens is that I'm not very adept with them. but would be to do some envelope art. And that makes this a really special thing then, is that we repeat some of these patterns or some of these shapes or something around the envelope. So there we are, it's my card. Gold all around. So I hope that you've enjoyed this, that you'd be prepared to give this a go. It'd be great if you would. And I look forward to seeing you here again. Take care for now. I hope I've given you a bit of a boost about having a go at drawing. Practice is the most important thing, more than anything else, and the only way to develop skills is to practice, practice, practice. And we all start off as beginners. Nobody comes out of the womb being a perfect artist. Okay, so take care, look after yourselves and be creative. Bye for now. Bye.